I think I'm going to begin. It's a little past 11:45, and we're going to talk about life happening and how to deal with the unexpected. The goals of the session are to come to terms with life does come with unexpected crises, and probably you all in this room have experienced one or two already. And what can we do to be ready for a mini or a large crisis? And what do we need to do when there's discord in a family or in family members? And what if our family members resist doing anything and their safety's at risk? I was just talking to a woman during the break and said that her husband's exhibiting all the signs of dementia, but he refuses to be tested. Well, that's one of those kind of things you have to take some action. And it's challenging for sure. So what are some of these unexpected crises that we might experience? Diagnosis of a serious illness, like Dr. Kernison was talking about. You know, you get a diagnosis and then now what? And often when you get a diagnosis, especially with Alzheimer's disease, since that's been my focus of my profession, that family is given that diagnosis, but nothing else. Come back and see me in 6 months. Wow, what do we do? So death of a spouse or other family member, I'm going to share with you a little bit of my experiences. My husband, totally healthy, died suddenly, drowned. So your life is turned upside down when that person wasn't sick and they just disappear. I think Dr. Kernison had that on her slide. An accident happens and somebody is not there anymore. Family member has a dementia. That is a crisis. That is a, what do we do? What do we need to change our life? What do we need to change our values? What do we need to do? And it doesn't come with a guidebook necessarily for you. It's individualized. Then there's a financial crisis that can happen for a variety of reasons, that your assets just aren't as large as they need to be to provide maybe care or even a move or a change of environment that you might need. Natural disasters, we were just told in nightly news for the last couple of nights about earthquake preparedness. You know, we're expecting that in the Bay Area, but throughout the country there's other kinds of crises. We had that terrible rain in January and lots of houses were flooded, and Lexi from our church, her house actually fell down the cliff, her whole house. So what do you do? How do you prepare? Moving due to one of the aboves, that's a crisis, that's a new environment. Loss of driving privileges, that's another issue that's really important here, and especially in the Bay Area, in the suburbs. I grew up in San Francisco and the bus system was pretty good, even if you didn't know how to drive or couldn't drive anymore. But it's not so good here. Sensory losses. We heard 2 speakers now, or 3 with me, and I don't know, Pam's gonna talk about it too, but the loss of hearing is definitely isolating for people, and vision loss as well. And then there is crisis over sibling conflict. As a family therapist during my 40 years of doing this work, a lot of families come to me on parent care, but they're arguing, constantly arguing. It's the same argument that probably happened around the cereal box when they were kids. So the first step is being prepared for the crisis you don't know about. And again, hopefully you've heard Kathy and you just heard Dr. Kernison. What's most important to you? You know, as one of the things I've asked my clients, whether a counseling client or a geriatric care management family, is what's really important to you? What gives your life joy and meaning? Know that, think about it. Think about it maybe tonight when you go home. What is it that gives my life meaning and purpose? What type of care would you want if you needed care? Did you want care in your home? Do you want to move? And what are the options? Hopefully some of you heard Eileen and Julie talk about options for living, retirement living. There's lots of options. And have you looked at what's out there just in case? Again, joy and meaning, I think, is really important, because even if you have Alzheimer's disease, cancer, or some other progressive illness, you can keep joy and meaning in your life. You might have to adapt it, but you want to keep that in your life. And most importantly, does your family know your values? Do they know what's important to you? My kids know what's important to me, and this is really a kind of a funny thing, but I need to see a tree. I'm so glad I'm sitting at this place right now. I can see 3, 4 trees, or maybe 50 trees outside these windows, outside my office windows, my house windows. I cannot be in a place that I have to look at another building. I must see trees. So I have that written in my legal documents, actually, but the kids know it. And there are all kinds of things that we value in our environment, or maybe our daily life. My kids know how my sheets are supposed to be tight. They also know what I want to wear to bed and not wear to bed. So these are little things that are about quality of life. They're unique to us individually. And if you're here listening to me about a parent, your parent has those things too, and you want to know about them. Do you have the right legal documents, and are they clear about what you want? I told Kathy before she started, oh my God, there's an owl. No, it's a hawk flying in there. Anyway, I told Kathy before she began, remember, Kathy, in my legal documents, it says I have to be dead 3 days before I'm cremated, because I want to make sure the spirit gets out of my body. But I wrote that in my legal papers, because it was important to me. And, you know, those are little silly things, maybe, but anything that's important to you, you got to integrate them into your legal documents. Again, we're talking about a crisis happening where maybe you didn't have time. Maybe the person who's the first decision maker in your advanced health directive can't be found. And so you're in an ER situation, and they have to talk to the person, my attorney has like 5 people. If this person's not available, call this person, this person, this person. You know, they get to that person, and maybe I haven't articulated that with them in a conversation, but if it's in writing, it's going to happen. And do you think there could be discord among your friends or family? Is somebody going to second guess why you're making that decision for another family member? This is especially about adult children taking care of their parent. But also, if you're a healthy older adult and hope to, live till you die, as Dr. Kernison said, you want to make sure that your kids know, again, what you want, and that they all agree on whatever it is that you want. When my husband first died, my kids were, of course, all talking about what mom should, with a capital S, do. And, well, she can't live alone. Bruce did too much for her. She needs somebody to live with her. And one of my kids said, I can't remember what page it is, read page 7 of Mom's book. And then I was so glad I wrote that book, because it said, don't tell your parent what they should do. You tell your parent what you're concerned about. So again, they will all have their opinions, or somebody will have an opinion, and make sure that they're going to respect whatever your decision is. Okay. With that. Okay. Okay. So what is important to you, you're going to take care of. You're going to think about that. And you're going to make sure that your family knows all those things. And, it's moving here, but not there. Okay. Okay, crisis preparedness. The natural disaster client preparedness, most of that you could find on probably the Red Cross or the local community crisis preparation websites. But make sure you do have that emergency kit, because even fires might make us, whoops, there we go. A fire, neighborhood got evacuated in bits and pieces of potential fires. So you need to have that. It sometimes says 3 days, I say 5 days, about what I've been seeing across the country, across the world. And don't forget medications and glasses. And if you have a hearing aid, a way to recharge that or replace batteries. Have your home checked for safety. And do you have working fire alarms? It's really good, or smoke detectors, fire alarms in your house, that you check them at least once a year. A lot of people decide that it's time to check that on the date of their birthday, or sometimes in a couple situation in the date of their anniversary. So just a time to remember. This bullet comes from my mother, who lived in San Francisco, and she said she never let the gas in her car go below half a tank. And I think that's really wise planning for any kind of crisis, even getting a family member to a hospital when you're in the middle of the night and your tank is on empty. So again, that's an important thing. And if you can have the hand crank cell phone charger, that's important as well. I know if you donate to KQED, that's how I got mine, that was one of the gifts, that my hand cranking cell phone charger. A list of your insurances and copies of important papers. If you have a backpack, I have a backpack in my coat closet next to the front door. And I also have a printout list about, if I have enough time, what would I take with me out of the house? You can't take everything, you don't have enough time. So if you have to leave quickly in a natural disaster, know what you want to take that's most important to you that you would lose and feel terrible about. And also cash and small bills in that backpack, and a list of your meds, pharmacies, and doctors. And some of that goes to the healthcare emergencies. Dr. Kernison referred to prepareforyourcare.org, which is I'm going to talk about that to the whole audience when we talk about resources, but they also have a prepare to go to the hospital checklist of things to take. And they suggest things like water bottles, and sometimes you don't get enough water if you're hospitalized, but there's lots of things that they have if you have to go to the emergency room in the middle of the night or suddenly, that you're prepared. It could be the same probably backpack that you use for that as well. And an up-to-date advanced power of attorney. And why Dr. Kernison likes the Prepare for Your Care document as I do, it's easy to understand, and it's just not about treatment about end of life. It actually is about treatment now. If you have an illness, you're not dying, but you need care, this document actually says what kind of care you want. And it has a continuum. You can say, I want full care, or I want something in the middle. I want to be comfort care or full care. So and this is not just for end of life. This is for any kind of illness. And at end of life, what do you want? For me, it would just be comfort care. It wouldn't be in the middle. So you have two continuums in this document. And even if you don't want to write a new advanced healthcare directive, this document is worth reading just to give you ideas of things to talk about. And have you told your family clearly what you want and don't want? Now you could write that in this document, and I know that Bruce and I, in our documents for each other, because I work so much with family caregivers, we said it's important for the well spouse to take care of themselves. We actually wrote it out. So there are places to do that in that document. And so getting self-care, I'm always preaching this when I'm talking to a family caregiver. You need to go for a massage, or you need to have a day out. You need to have lunch with a friend. You need to go play golf. I'm always giving that kind of prescription for family caregivers, but it needs to happen for whoever is caring for you. And you can write that in there, even if it's an adult son or daughter that's going to make decisions for you. You want to make sure they're not giving up their life. And do you have a favorite care facility? And it shouldn't just be care facilities. Maybe you have a favorite retirement community. My daughter was saying to me, she was here 2 weekends ago, about, well, if you couldn't live in your own house, which I want to with care, if I need it, where would you like? So I gave her a couple of names of places I like now, but I might not like them in the future because they change. They change owners, they change executive directors. So I'll have to keep her up to date with that, what I like best, probably once a year. So the unexpected new diagnosis, this is really important to me, and important to me to communicate to all of you, is if your physician is suggesting, especially something that has surgery, get a second opinion. And I'm just going to give you a quick story of myself. I had 2 cardiologists, one at Stanford, one here locally. The local one said, your heart rate is too low. I went to my Stanford cardiologist. He told me to relax, put my body up and down with his hand many times, listen to my heart, and he said, you just need your medication cut in half. That's a big difference from needing a pacemaker to just cutting medication in half. A surgical procedure, actually, but I hear that all the time. That's why you want to get a second opinion, so you don't go slippery down that line. Okay. Do you understand the illness you have? And again, I've heard this so many times that the person or the family member doesn't understand, but the individual with the illness, maybe it's something you've never heard of before. So you want to find a health coach. I kind of alluded to Pam being my health coach, but there are other people that do kind of help you look at what you're dealing with and help you get a roadmap for dealing with that illness and hopefully getting you back to functioning, or at least helping you with the other options and what those options would cost in time and energy. So you want to really understand what's going on with you so you can make those life changes. And again, sharing that with your family members is important. And the same thing with new medications. You know, I think the #1 reason why older adults get hospitalized is medication errors. It's amazing. Probably #2 is falls. So again, understand that medication and ask questions about it. Many times I've been offered a medication, again, I've been in the field for a long time, and I said, no way will I take that one. Or no way will you give my mother Haldol. I don't care what you say is going on with her, she won't take that drug. So, because I was an advocate and I wasn't gonna let my mom have it, nor sometimes will I take a medication that I don't feel is safe or good for me. I'll listen to why somebody wants to do that, and then I'll go get that second opinion. And sometimes they're right and I'm wrong, but I want to research it. So besides traditional, have you tried Western medicine? Have you tried Eastern practices to help with whatever your condition is, whether it's acupuncture or Tai Chi or something other than what we're normally prescribed? And again, have you found a support group? And we heard earlier, I think I heard twice today already, the struggle finding the right support group. And again, with some illness, there's cancer support, there's stroke support, there's dementia support, and there are supports for other kind of rare illnesses as well. Have you looked into those things? The death of a spouse or a significant other is a major change in one's life, having experienced it myself like 19 months ago. Have you talked to your spouse about the role each of you play? You know, who pays the bills, who does the dog or pet care? What does that person do? What about websites and access to them? Or even access to a cell phone. I'm still struggling with trying to get my husband's cell phone credited back to me at Verizon for lots and lots of reasons. It's taken hours and hours, and I still haven't succeeded yet, not giving up. But do you know all these passwords? Have you discussed your values? I write a monthly newsletter that any of you could subscribe to, but I wrote about spouses knowing what other spouse wants, and one of the individuals in our church was talking to me at the coffee time, and he said, you know what? My wife and I have never talked to each other about what we want or don't want. Oh, okay, that's time to have a conversation about, especially end-of-life care. What do you want or don't want? Have you planned and paid for a burial or cremation? It makes it a whole lot easier. And does your spouse know what you want? And have you told your extended family? In my situation with my mom's dying, and my mom said she wanted to be cremated, my brothers were shocked that she wanted to be cremated because Dad wasn't. But she clearly told me that that's what she wanted. But I should have told them before she died instead of after she died, because it made them uncomfortable with that process, but that's what she wanted, and it needed to be shared with everyone in the family. If your spouse or family member has collections, or parent, do you know what those collections are and what they're worth and how you would dispose of them? Is there a plan? Have you talked to your attorney or financial planner on what your finances might look like when one of you passes? And again, a lot of people think you're going to get more Social Security. Not necessarily. You might be the higher Social Security person and you're just going to get that check. You're not going to get the second check. So again, talk to your financial people about that. So I think this got alluded to in the other two talks, but about 50% of the people over the age of 85 will die with a dementia. Sometimes it hasn't upset their quality of life, and other times it has. So the reality of, if you're not following all those healthy brain things that Dr. Kernison and Grace talked about earlier, you could definitely develop a dementia, and it can be overwhelming. Again, you can say to your family, like my kids know, that if I develop that, I want to stay in my own home, I want to have pets. And I used to say, build a really high fence so I can't climb over it, but I couldn't even climb over the low fence. So you might want to put a lock on the fence, but I like to be outdoors. So if I have dementia, this is what I would want. And it's really good to articulate that. And sometimes an attorney that's working with you will actually ask you that and have a dementia care plan. If anybody wants a copy of all these slides, all you have to, and I'll tell you, my email is on one of the handouts on resources. Just email me and I'll send you all the slides, and so you don't have to take so many notes. With adult children, because there are hard decisions that need to be made when somebody's safety is at risk, and you have to move the parent to a safer place because their decision making is impaired and they're at risk. You might want to get into a support group or call the Alzheimer's Association for more information and education. And my advice has always been, you know, you're going to have to do that. And the adult children always say, well, I'm waiting for mom to say that's okay, that yes, she will move. Or I showed mom 3 places and she said she'll never move to those. Well, mom doesn't have a choice. At some point, her safety is at risk, and you might be at risk for elder abuse or neglect if you don't make sure she's got a good, safe place. So if that person is at risk and their safety is jeopardized, you do face resistance. So you could work with a geriatric care manager or an aging life care expert. I'm a past president of that organization. It's a national organization. There's some terrific geriatric care managers in our area. Not enough geriatricians, but lots of geriatric care managers. The other thing is emotional support. Emotional support in a crisis. Ask for help. You know, Dr. Kernison was talking about interdependence. You've probably been a helper. You're here in this class or at this conference today. You've been a helper. Ask for help when you need it. Don't wait for something more serious to happen and that you're in the hospital before somebody knows you needed help. Call a friend or professional. Don't be alone in any crisis, whether it's a housing disaster, a natural disaster, or a physical issue that's happening with you, or maybe it's just grief or loneliness. I mean, it's so important to be out there and socializing. So you want to share your feelings and find a good listener. And at LOPC and at churches around the country, there are Stephen ministers. They're free. They're trained to be great listeners, great resource. Don't make big decisions in the midst of a crisis. Give yourself time. As a new widow, I know I was told not to make any decisions about moving or not moving or selling or not selling anything for that first year. And I think that was good information, that you feel, I think people in a crisis sometimes feel like they need to do stuff. You need to do stuff, but not stuff that's really big that you might be sorry for later on. And I think Dr. Kernison and Grace alluded to mindfulness, the importance of spending some time now, learning mindfulness now, practices. If you don't know them, the breathing exercises, Dr. Andrew Weil has a great way of, you take a breath in to a count of maybe 3 or 4, you hold it to a count of 4 or 5, 7, I can't remember exactly what the combination is. I just know how to do it. I don't count anymore. And then the exhale is longer than the inhale and the holding. And if you do that kind of breath exercise, it really calms you down. So, you know, in a crisis, you need to just calm down and get your bearing. So learning these things now, before you're faced with a crisis, will help you with any crisis that's presented to us. You know, so there's the breathing exercises, there's, I like the loving kindness meditation. I don't know if anybody doesn't know that, I send you that. That's my favorite. I do it many times during the day, probably. And because it's about, you do it for yourself, you do it for somebody you love, you do it for a stranger, and then you do it for somebody like one of those bad political people that lives in Russia, that kind of person. And when you do that for that kind of person, at least you put out positive energy someplace that you can't do anything else about. So I think mindfulness is really important for a healthy brain as well. So discord in families, that does happen. And, you know, these are the comments I've been hearing, and sometimes here in a family meeting. Mom should stay in her own home with help. Mom doesn't need any help, she is just fine. Mom needs to move to assisted living. Mom should move to an active senior residence, and I hear that about people who have dementia moving to active senior residence. They're going to be asked to move out of it if they're in the mid-stage of the dementia. That's not a good choice. Mom should move closer to our brother because he's a doctor, but he's an ER doctor. He knows nothing about the illness that mom or dad has. So again, families get into tough spots when they're dealing with a crisis. So family meetings before crisis. I've held many of these with families or instructed families how to do this. Number one, I don't have this on this slide, but I have everybody in the room tell me who they're most concerned about and what they would like to happen in that meeting. And we just go around and everybody says that. No one can comment. And once I had a family that wanted to take dad out of a nursing home because the daughter didn't like the care, move him into their house with 3 active, great teenagers, and put him in their family room. Well, that was going to disrupt everybody's life, everybody, because mom couldn't then visit dad, who was in a nursing home outside of Rossmore. She could take the little bus and go see him every day. It would disrupt the kids. The brother was concerned, he lived out of the city, but concerned about his sister's mental health. When I went around the room and came back to the daughter who asked me to do the meeting, she started to cry and just said, Linda, can you help us make it better in the nursing home? It was so evident to her that that was the best decision. So sometimes when you give everybody the space to say who they're most concerned about, and everybody's concerned about somebody else, they realize what the real issues are and what they need help with. So the goal of the family meeting is to share wishes, if you're having a family member with your own kids, and get everyone on board to see what the older adult, you, wants in a crisis. And I did a similar talk at the Commonwealth Club in San Francisco. It was a huge crowd that came to talk. I think it was the elephant in the room, how to have difficult discussions. And in kind of my first supervisor, when I was a social worker in my undergraduate work, he and his wife, this guy had a PhD in social work. And I said, why are you here? My kids don't want to hear us talk about the end of our life, and we need help. And sometimes people aren't open to hearing that. And it's not because of control, it's because of love and loss. But the reality of longer lives is someday our lives expire. I have a client that I was working with recently, and she said her husband has an expiration date on his foot. That he was going into the end of life phase. But I kind of said, yeah, we all have an expiration date, but we don't know what that date is. So again, sometimes our family members don't want to talk about it, and you could bring in a pastor or somebody else, a friend, or a geriatric care manager to help with that meeting, especially when the kids don't want to hear it. And this is where you want to share your values and make to the person that's going to make decisions when you can't. You want to share information on who your advisors are and where to find that information, whether it's legal information, whether it's financial information, whether it's where all your passwords are hidden. You want everyone to have time to ask questions, and you want to ask them to honor whatever it is that's most important to you, whether it's me to be able to see those green trees or to live in my own home as long as it's possible. This is a technique for when you're asking for help. And when you're asking for help, I'm going to give you an example of my asking one of my brothers for help. My mother was living in San Francisco. I'm over here. Mom takes a blood thinner medication, really important because she's a stroke, she's had some strokes, so she needs this medication. And I was calling her every night to make her help her remember to take that little pink pill. And I was getting tired. I worked full time. I had a big practice at that time. I was just exhausted. So the fact is here, Mom needs a reminder to take her medication. And the impact on you, whoever you are, on me is I'm exhausted. I'm running a business. I have a husband. I have grandkids. I have friends. I can't call Mom every night. And then the key to this little technique is the R. We're going by FIRR down, the acronym there, the respect. So I say to my brother Gary, who didn't live very far from my mother in San Francisco, but he took a lot of pain medications and he really couldn't drive, especially at night. He was gone. But he could talk to Mom. And I said, I know that you have your own medical challenges. That's the respect part. But the request is the last R. Can you call Mom on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday nights and remind her to take the pink pill? And she could take it anytime from 5 o'clock on. She needs to take it in the evening. So the FIR technique, and when I was teaching a class back in the Eldercare days, and my granddaughter was here, she said, hey, Grandma, can I use that with my friends? I said, you can, 14-year-old, 15-year-old girls. And she said, it does work. That respect thing, Grandma, really works, that you hear what's going on with them, and then you make that request. So just remember that if you get into a situation where you need to ask for help, where you think there might be resistance or pushback, to put in that kindness with the respect. And now I'm going to open it up for questions. You got me.
You said you do have all of these on your website?
No, you have to ask me to send you the slides. Anybody have some generalized questions about dealing with crises or being prepared? Or have something to contribute? What are you doing? That's one of the things that I found so enriching to my life is the ideas that have come from people in audiences like this. So is anybody doing anything or has done anything? Ann?
I found a book on Amazon. The title was called I'm Dead, Now What?
A book on Amazon, I'm Dead, Now What?
And it's blank, but it has pages, and it's a great guide, and I have followed it. Actually, I'm copying the cover of the book and putting it on my own notebook. But I'm making copies for all three of my kids. And in that book, in addition to all the legal things and passwords and all of that, I am writing a hopefully brief synopsis of taking them on a walk through my house. What's important to me, what's valuable, what doesn't matter. I put a caveat in there that I would really like my second son to have this if he wants it, but if he doesn't want it, that's all right too. So it's been a kind of an eye-opener for me to write that book. I'm giving it to them for Christmas. I don't know about their mother being dead is a great Christmas gift, but
I don't know if you all can hear that, but I'm Dead, Now What? It's a blank book. She's filling it out. It has some guidelines for important stuff, and then she's filled it out with a guide through the house that shows what's valuable to her, what's important to her in each room. And if they want it, take it. If they don't want it, get rid of it, right? That's the other thing I'm trying to do right now is get rid of the clutter in my house so my kids don't have to do that. Anyone else? Yes.
Two comments, Linda. With regard to second opinions, I have a personal example that it works on anything. In this case, dental. I have a bridge in my mouth and it came loose. It's been in there for a long time, and the first dentist said I can fix it, but I have to replace it for $7,000. I got a second opinion, and the dentist said it needs to be glued for $150. I switched dentists.
Did you all hear that? Second opinion? Huge difference in cost.
Yep.
With a dental issue.
And then the second one is about unanticipated disasters. Last night, as I was getting in bed, my phone went off, and I was getting an alert from my brother that he had fallen. He happens to be in Hawaii right now, and there were 3 alerts in a row. So I called him right away, and it turned out he had been in an auto accident, and his watch had gone off and had sent out the alert. And I learned right there that he was, really upset and nervous. All I can do from this end is just to try and calm him down. So your comments about keeping calm and getting people calm are really, they hit me hard as of last night. I think that there's nothing more important when you get hit with a crisis right in the face. I spent quite a bit of time with him on the phone. I'm not sure how calm he was at the end, but he was calmer than he was when he started.
Yeah, and I am so glad you brought that example. His brother he got an alert from the brother's watch. He had fallen. It was a car accident. And him talking to the brother probably calmed him down. That's one of the things I say in a crisis is, you need to talk to somebody. When my husband died in Hawaii, drowned on our vacation, I needed to talk to somebody. And I called Gerald, one of our pastors here. And oh my God, I just felt, of course I called my daughter who got a flight from LA to Hawaii and got there within 5 hours. It was amazing. But I just needed to talk to somebody to help me, where do I go now? I just put myself back in a support group that I'm going to get back in, because my whole thing was worrying about myself. Instead of thinking about him died, it's like, what do I do now? What happens to my life? I've been doing this all my life. I've been helping other people, but here comes this crisis that I had no idea would happen to me or him, because he was a very healthy person, very, very healthy person. And it's just like he disappeared, and what's going to happen? You know, I've been able to, you know, get a hold of myself, but in that, you really, if I didn't talk to Gerald just then I think I would have been just a puddle to be, you know, put out to the sea with my husband. It was just so helpful. So even if you think you didn't help him, Al, you did, you know, you did.
I have two friends who are going into dementia, and I would like to know resources of how to talk with them when they are confused and words are becoming obscure.
Okay. So the question is, a couple of friends just going into dementia and how to talk to them. And you might think that it has nothing to do with the crisis, but it has a lot to do with the crisis, because somebody with a dementia that's not responded to correctly could wander, and many people do wander and get injured. So that's a great question. It's to listen it's called active listening. What's the content of what they're saying? And can you just pick up that content and acknowledge it without knowing the details of it, especially if somebody has garbled speech. With dementia, receptive and expressive aphasia happens, so people don't understand what's coming in, and when they try to express it outward, they can't find the right word. So it's anxiety for them. So if you're a friend, I think there is a book on how to be a friend, and in my book it's how to talk to somebody with dementia, and I also do a free dementia Zoom class too. So it's in the resources, and I'll talk to you when the whole group is back. But again, it's saying, oh, you're talking about the garden. Your garden looks beautiful. You're gonna pick a word out and respond to it. If it's incorrect, they're gonna probably give you some other clues. You're not gonna correct them. In my do's and don'ts of communicating with somebody with dementia is you don't correct misinformation unless you have to. If it's a danger, then you have to. If they say today is May 10th, who cares if it's not May 10th? You don't have to correct it. Yeah, so they say today's May 10th and it's not. A lot of people have trouble with this. Then you say, it's a beautiful time of year. See how, it doesn't matter. A lot of the conversation doesn't matter. What matters is your presence. And I think we heard that from Dr. Kernison as well, and from Grace. It's just that social presence. It's the spirit. When I ran the very first Alzheimer respite program, I think in the Bay Area at Grace Presbyterian Church in 1984. And I learned so much from the people with dementia, that there was this lady there that ran her own business, never married, successful businesswoman, lived in Rossmore, and she had totally garbled speech. And I ate my lunch with her, and I thanked her for being my partner at lunch, and she never usually spoke in complete sentences. And she said to me, whenever you're in the city, stop by. She wasn't in San Francisco, she was in Walnut Creek. But I was talking to her or listening to her as adult to adult, and not the content of her words. But she was able to gather enough words to give me back, thank you for stop by anytime you're in the city. And she probably wouldn't be able to do that 2 hours from then. But she was able to do that. And I think it was because she felt heard, understood, eye contact, Making eye contact, if you're dealing with anybody with dementia, is really important. Never talking from the side or behind, but right in front, and making eye contact. And sometimes touch to get the person to look at you. Very important.
Yeah, I wonder if you could address how to handle, maybe some tricks on how to handle other people that are resisting even just having a family meeting. We don't need to do this. This little thing, we're not gonna.
We don't need a
us in the
family
middle,
meeting.
This little thing, then I'm like, we just all get together and address everything. There's all these people talking about stuff all over the place.
Yeah.
But they don't wanna do it.
That happens in lots of families. Everybody's talking about it. So maybe there's two having this conversation, two having that conversation, and nobody's facing the whole thing. Sometimes I think it's best that you bring in an expert to convene the meeting so we can all be on the same page. If mom or dad or my husband or whoever has a crisis, I want to get everybody's opinion. You have to value what they're going to bring to it, even if you don't agree with it. And if you have a good convener of that meeting, they'll be able to deal with that. But there's a goal, and that we've invited that person to be participant in that family meeting because they have something to add. Not because, living on a cruise ship, some people do, might not be the best thing for mom. But brother thinks that that's a good idea because it costs less than assisted living. I've heard that.
So I work with people who have behavioral problems and who don't fit into the norms of assisted living or memory care, or maybe the beginning of dementia. And I was wondering, and I also, answer to your question, is I do expressive arts therapies. And so it's another way to connect to people non-verbally. And I have a business that does it. I do it here at the fellowship and also at the dementia program in Danville. And I agree with you. I think people just need to respect. They need the eye contact. I had a gentleman there who told me he spoke Italian. He said, because I talk like this and I do this and I do like, and that's how we talk to you. They just want attention and they just want somebody to give them respect.
Renee said that she works with people with behavioral problems, maybe have dementia or don't have dementia. And expressive therapies and art therapies are a way to reach people, really a good way to have a visit with somebody, to do an art project with it, an adult-looking art project. I mean, coloring sometimes works, but and you could do something like paint by number, and both of you are working on the painting at the same time. So even if the person isn't doing it right, you don't have to correct it. It's not important. It's important, actually, sometimes that art that's produced by people with behavioral problems is more expressive than any words that they can find. So it is a way in to the inner feelings and thoughts of that person. Yeah, it's amazing. So don't overlook that in working with family members with any kind of disability. I think the expressive arts are really important.
I've been a student minister here for over 20 years, and I think one of the things that gets overlooked is listening. So for caregivers, they're so wrapped up that no one listens to them. So a lot of these wonderful resources suggesting a Stephen minister who is basically a neutral, non-judgmental, compassionate listener. It's life-giving.
The Stephen minister is trained to be a listener, really trained to listen. That active listening that I was talking about, they do a lot of that. And I think that there is such a great gift in listening. We, most of the time, aren't listening. We're thinking about our response to what somebody else is saying. And that gets in the way of listening because you're thinking. Your brain becomes the problem. And that's why that neutral person, the Stephen minister or therapist or pastor, can listen more easily than a family member can. So take advantage of that resource. Thank you for...
The thing is, the neutral listener has no investment in the outcome. So, and it's totally confidential. So you can say anything and everything that you would never say to other people embroiled in your situation.
Right.
And it's, it lightens the load.
I'm so glad you talked about the caregiver. If you're a Stephen ministers can go see a caregiving couple and have time with the person who's the primary caregiver. Totally a great resource. Because remember, if their family member has dementia, there's no communication there, or not much communication there, because the person with dementia doesn't have the skills anymore. So they're really hungry for somebody to really listen and hear. Many years ago, I went to, when I first started doing care management, it was an African-American woman who had come to the West Coast during the war with her husband because they needed workers there. And she's a successful woman, had a hairdressing business, and her husband was a civil servant, but now he had dementia. And she was pretty isolated there in her home, beautiful home that she had made for the two of them. They didn't have any children. And I went there to help her because she called and didn't know what to do. And I went to see her, and I was there for probably an hour. At the end of an hour, I hadn't said much at all. And she just talked constantly for that 1 hour with me saying, oh, wow, wonderful, that's good, wow. I don't even know if I gave her any ideas. And she said, this has been the best hour of my year, having you here. So, I mean, I learned really early in my profession is you don't have to always be the wise one with all the ideas. You just have to listen, to be there for somebody, human being to human being, spirit to spirit, kind of get the stuff out, the education stuff and the mental processing out of your brain, and just be, and let that person have their time to talk. And thank you for sharing that, and for reminding me of that great example I had with that wonderful woman.
I know you have had a long-term interest in elder orphans, but I'm wondering for myself, after I've hired the lawyer and I've hired the fiduciary and I've made plans and I've written down where my passwords are and all of this, the thing that concerns me is finding, especially in the chaos it seems to me it's going on in the world, is finding longer-term support. And you can look for it, let's say, in some place like a active senior community or something like that. Anyway, I'd like your ideas on how to generate that support.
The question, all of you probably didn't hear that, as a solo senior, a person without a partner or adult children, done all the plans, got everything in mind, but how do you find support for just going on and dealing with kind of the everyday crises, or getting support when you need it and you don't have a big support system? So for me, it's belonging to groups. I mean, I belong to LOPC, and this church, or doesn't matter whether it's a synagogue, a church, or a club, but then you get tight with one another. And I don't know if you've all watched the Netflix thing on Living to Be 100. Anybody see that? Isn't it tremendous? It's so good. It's like your homework I'm giving you. Find Netflix, find somebody that has Netflix, and just, I think it might be I just went through the whole thing one night. It might be 3 episodes. It's about the blue zones and what you talked about just then, Zora, in Hiroshima, in Japan. And it looked like they were all women. I didn't know, and they were all over 100 or near 100, supporting one another. And they even supported one another in that situation financially if somebody got into a little problem. They became so tight as a community that they were living longer. I mean, that's that, you know, we talk about positivity. I mean, thank God the AMA just came out with this research that if you're thinking positive about your aging and your long life, you're gonna live longer, right? Well, that's what these people do in these blue zones. All of them are thinking positive. They're keeping their bodies active. All of these people are physically active, intellectually active, curious, giving, and receiving. Giving and receiving. It's hard to receive when you've been a giver. I know that personally. And asking for help when they need it and taking it. So watch the Netflix. It's a documentary on the blue zones of living to be 100. You will be there. All the diets we talked about today, all the exercise we've talked today, all that social stimulation, the mindfulness, you know, doing Tai Chi or some sort of meditation, all of that stuff works. It does work. These people are living to be 100, which is amazing. Yeah. Time? Thank you all for coming. Yeah.